Hello again, and welcome to Media War Stories, behind the scenes tales from the front lines of the media. I'm your host, Tom Curley. How are you all doing today? If you the first time you're tuning in, what the hell is wrong with you? As you know, we tell stories, war stories, behind the scenes stuff from our days in the industry. I work for CBS, and this guy here, veteran TV Boston reporter Garry Armstrong, was in Boston many years. Probably the same amount as eyes.
Not
Garry,
that
how are you
many.
doing today? Not that many. How you doing today?
It's a little chilly out there today, I think but up here in New England, we have to anticipate that, the weather will be up one day and down maybe the same day. So doing okay. How about you?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, fine. Can't complain. Spring is springing.
Okay. That was a
Um,
long pause
Nothing's a
before
problem.
responding.
Yeah, yeah. All I'm trying to think is, actually, we had a real scare with our dog Lexi um, last week. All of a sudden, she got off the couch and her back legs kept falling apart, and she couldn't stand up. And we thought she had a stroke, and we panicked. She's 14 and a half, and so we rushed her to the
Hmm.
emergency vet. And after many thousands of dollars, um, first they thought she had a brain tumor, and
Hmm.
we thought she had a stroke. They thought she had a brain tumor because her eyes were moving; they were twitching, doot, 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 like, and her head was tilted to the
Hmm.
right, and
Right.
so her back legs weren't weak. She was falling down. She was basically, the room was spinning, and she had no balance.
Yeah.
And this is indicative of a brain tumor. And of course, we were all freaked out.
Right.
And if it wasn't a brain tumor, it was like meningitis or encephalitis. So in the case of
Boy.
the brain tumor, they might be able to use radiation. So anyway, to make a long story short, um, they did an MRI, and she doesn't have a brain tumor.
It might be a tumor.
It's not a tumor. It's not a tumor at all.
Thank God. And then they did an MR,
Yeah.
a uh, spinal tap, and they
Yeah.
found that it was a little high, but there was really no evidence of any kind of meningitis. So then they decided that what it is, which is apparently a very common thing, called old dog. Shit, I can't remember the name of it. Old dog. Um, Basically, old dog dizzy disease. It's idiopathic,
So
which
that's
means they have
something
no
benign
idea what
then.
causes it. Yes, it's benign. It
Hmm.
happens. It'll probably never happen again. They said that she could uh, uh, make a full recovery. The head will probably still tilt. She just looks cute. Uh,
Yeah.
and it could take months, or it could happen quickly.
Yeah, when we received your first email that when you were fearing the worst, we here didn't quite know what to say. I mean, besides the fact that we're good friends, when you're in that scenario, thinking that you're losing your animal, we've all been there, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
when I go to pieces. All the emotions I normally keep suppressed. Can't do that when your
Oh
animal
yeah.
was dying. I mean,
Oh
I get
no, no.
teary-eyed, and,
It's
and I didn't know what to
it's.
say to
Oh,
you.
I just. Oh, you don't. There's not because there's nothing you can say. The point is she's made a full recovery. I mean, a completely full
Hmm.
recovery. And if it wasn't for the
That's
fact that they
great.
shaved her head to do the spinal tap, you would never know that she was sick. And they say it'll probably never happen again. And if it does, it's
That's great.
basically, it's a dizzy spell that'll go away. So other than that, there's
Right.
nothing new. So we
That's
were talking before
wonderful.
the show, and you said you had some really interesting stories about your days with the Boston mob. That must have been
Yeah.
interesting. So, sally
That
forth.
Yeah, I want to make sure I get my story told and then get back to the stuff you were talking about things then and now, talking about our country and the temperature of country. But yeah, vis-a-vis the involvement with the underworld, Boston is a very small, big town, put it that way. I had done in my first few months at the TV station in Boston, I had done a lot of stories in the North End, which is the predominantly Italian section of the city. And I had run into people who I didn't know who they were. They just seemed really amicable to being interviewed by whatever the story was. And I remember a couple of the stories were crime related. I was just trying to get information as to what happened and what people knew. And so I did that. And I apparently the stuff I did again as a newcomer, apparently it was relatively well done. And my boss has said, who did you know to get that info? Because some of the other reporters at the other stations don't have the info you have. And I said, I don't know. I just saw these people. And it was like, for me, it was like doing man on the street stuff. It was all anonymous. I didn't really know who I was talking to. And they said, well, you were talking to some pretty well known people. I said, what do you mean? And they said, you were talking to some bigwigs in the underworld. And I said, well, I didn't really know that. And they said, well, at any rate, good job. With that in mind, I'm out to dinner in the North End with a friend of mine. And we started to order dinner, and I was trying to impress her. So we had ordered large, so to speak. And the waiter came back over and said, would you like to order some champagne? And I said, well, I'm not sure. Don't worry about the money, I was told. Someone is buying this meal for you. You don't have to pay a cent. And I said, what do you mean? And I said, and the waiter said, well, if you look across the aisle there, you'll probably see a familiar face who is picking up the tab here. And I looked across the room, and it was a familiar face. Long story short, it turned out to be a fellow they called Jerry. His last name was Angiulo. And he was, if I'm saying this correctly, he was the head of the Italian mafiosa in Boston. They had the Italians, they had the Irish, and they had other branches of the mafia. But he was the head of the Italian section. It was also represented in the movie Black Mass, and I'm jumping around here, but he was represented in the Black Mass movie, which was about Whitey Bulger. At any rate, dinner is now over, and I paid the bill, and the waiter comes back over and says, "Here's that champagne that you don't want to leave without trying." And I said, "Well," and he said, "Mr. A wants to speak to you." And before I could say no, this gentleman had come over to the table, and he was smiling and extending his hand, and he was speaking to me in a hoarse whisper. Now, I didn't do anything mentally at that point. I was just very awkward with this. And I said, "You understand that I can't accept your very generous offer. It wouldn't look good." And he said, I know, but we were just trying to show you how much we appreciate the way you covered these stories, which would have reflected very badly on me and my business counterparts. And my brain is clicking as fast as it could as I was trying to think of something proper to say. And I kept coming back to that hoarse voice. And he said, I think I know what you're talking about. And yes, you're right about what you're thinking. And I said, what's that? And he said, from what I know, they're making a movie about the mafia, which we know doesn't exist. And I said, of course, it doesn't exist. And he said, we understand that Mr. Marlon Brando is playing someone who talks like me. And I said, well, I don't know. I haven't seen the film yet. And he said, when you do, you'll understand why I'm so upset about this. And I said, well, he said, call me Jerry. And he said, well, the next time you come in, if you've seen the movie, remember what I've told you. In the meantime, remember that I appreciate what you're doing, and I knew what he meant by we appreciate what you're doing. You're really a stand-up guy. My date is looking at all of this going on, and her mouth is dropping open, and the guy walks away. And so, in my mind's eye, I'm absorbing that he's saying Marlon Brando is playing Don Corleone. Again, hadn't seen the movie, and this guy is telling me that's who he really is. So I just let the whole thing drop, and I tried to explain that none of this was of my doing. And the next day in the newsroom, they were all abuzz that I was having dinner, which had been purchased by the head of the local mafia. And I kept saying, I didn't know. And they replied, of course that's what you would say. And I said, but guys, I didn't know. Well, we appreciate you being savvy, and we'll try to use that in the years to come. But congratulations on having a nice relationship with them. And there was another reporter in the newsroom who prided himself on being what he thought the inside voice to the mafia. And he was always bragging about having scoops. And he came over and said, how were you able to talk up Jerry and Julo? And I said, I didn't. And he said, well, I'm the guy who knows all of them. I know where everybody lives, and you should join up with me. And I've told this part of the story before. I resisted any impulse to do that, to become, quote unquote, a voice for the mafia. And the reporter who tried to inveigle me to join up with him, he later was rubbed out in a shootout. It was called the Blackfriars murder. And this other guy was no longer a friend of the mafia. So all of this sort of circled around and reminded me of how close I came to, yeah, having a big scoop, but also how close I came to being another one of those reporters who disappeared mysteriously. That's my mob
Holy,
story, and it.
do you realize? Have
Go
you
ahead.
seen the TV series The Offer? It's on Paramount
Yes, I
Plus.
have. Yeah, I have. I have.
Oh,
Yes,
that
and
okay? Then holy mackerel,
so you
yes.
understand
Uh,
how that works.
how that absolutely well, people out there,
Yeah,
if you have
yeah.
Paramount Plus, it's worth getting it. It's the based on the recollections of Al Ruddy, the producer of The Godfather, and The
Yes,
Godfather Two,
yes,
and it's the most
yes. And that was all
the
right on the
the
mark.
producing the making of The Godfather was The Godfather. The mob actually got
Exactly.
involved. They
Exactly.
had to negotiate with the mob. It was amazing. And my favorite story out of that series was the one thing I always stuck with me with the Godfather was the actor that played Luca Brasi. All right, because I went, where did they find this guy? I mean, if this
Right.
guy doesn't look like a mafia mob enforcer, I don't know who
Exactly.
does. Right? Well, it turns out that he was an actual
Right.
mafia mob enforcer. There were two guys on the set from the mob that were there to make sure everything was on the up and up. And one of them was this guy, Luke. And the the day they were going to tape the scene, the wedding scene, where Luca Brasi goes, Don Corleone, on this day of your wedding, I hope your first child will be a masculine child. He's,
Yeah.
and he's rehearsing it. Okay, he's rehearsing it outside his office. Well, the day before they were supposed to shoot that scene, the actor that they hired to play Luca Brasi died. Okay, so they had
Hmm.
no actor. And so Coppola goes, hey, what about that guy? And because he's
Yeah.
there every day. Okay, and that's
Yeah.
how that came about. And then he was in all the other scenes where Luca Brasi was,
Exactly.
and I just went,
Exactly.
what brilliant casting! The stuff. I'm telling you, it's one of the most fascinating things,
It is.
series that I've seen. The other thing that I loved was the scene where Michael um, is in the Italian restaurant with the captain and Salazzo, and
Hmm.
he's got to kill them. And they've left him a gun behind the toilet in the bathroom. And
Right.
so
Right.
when he goes in there in the scene, he reaches behind and he panics. You can see him all of a sudden, he
Right.
can't find the
Right.
gun, right? And then he finds it. Well, when Coppola took Al Pacino in to do the scene, he went, okay, here's the scene. You're going to reach up. The gun is going to be here. And they had the gun taped. And they said, here's what you do. You reach up and then you take it, okay? Well, when
Right.
Pacino left, he told the prop master, he said, move the gun 6 inches over. So when Pacino went in to do the thing, he grabbed where the gun was supposed to be, and it wasn't. That was all real. The reason that it's like, oh my God, what a great actor. No, he panicked because he couldn't find the
Yeah.
gun. It's like, genius.
Find it.
It's a fascinating movie. And
You know, yeah, that's obviously great film lore. Now, all I can say is, like you and like so many other people, the movie is, really really big. But my point is, when you're in that lifestyle in real life, and the movie is running through a reel in your head, and you're trying to have conversation with these people who are flesh and blood, it gets really crazy, and you're trying to think of saying the right thing. In my case, fortunately, I was dealing from, call it, ignorance on that first evening that I described to you. Now, the movie came out, and it became the popular thing to do, to go to the North End and see if you could spot certain people. That was just plain stupid for people who tried to do that. Whenever I went there, it was either to cover a story or go to dinner. I mean, at that point, I was living walking time. The physical structure of the city has changed, but then you could walk from where I was living, and the North End was 10 or 15 minutes away walking time. So lots of time spent over there, and appreciate how I'm saying this because of what I did for a living and because of the time I spent in the North End. I became it's a popular. I became a familiar figure there, and people just kind of looked at me and smiled, and I was ushered into the restaurant or the pastry shop or something like that. So there was no awkwardness on one hand, but on the other hand, I kept thinking, am I talking to someone else who's a member of that organization? Uh, and if you go just a short time after that dinner I was just relating, I was back there again, and this time they came out and said, we're getting a lot of heat. We're getting a lot of heat from New York. We're getting a lot of heat from Chicago and Los Angeles. And I asked why, and they said, well, because of the way we're not only because of that movie, The Godfather, but because of the stories in the news and what the comics are saying. So we need to be very careful. And I said, I understand that, and I'm just here to do this particular story. If there's any information that can be passed on, I would be most grateful. And my stories are always framed to be accurate. And I got the old hand on the shoulder, and that someone said, "That's what we appreciate about you. You're not pushy." And of course, I'm not pushy. And I got the information I needed, and I made sure I framed it the correct way while giving the information. Of course, you never knew who gave me that information, but that was really a weird way of covering the mafia and also encountering them when you're there on a social visit. It's really weird to do that.
yeah, I know it could be scary as all get out. Wow, that was cool. That's cool. Well, I got something I had remembered I wanted to talk about, which is not technically related to the mob or actually anything, but it's more about the the crap that you have to go through to get something done because all of your bosses have to have some kind of input. In other words, I learned a long time ago that um, that never present a finished product to your superiors because they're going to find something wrong with it. And if you have two bosses, there's going to be
Right.
two things. If you have five, there's going to be five. So when we were doing CBS Market Watch, which we did for I don't know almost 10 years, we used to have a graphics artist for a part of the CBS graphic artist department. Fantastic. I mean, these guys are the
Yeah.
best of the best. And they would do the graphics for our show. We did a show, a fantastic show called CBS Market Watch Weekend. Was one of the best shows I ever worked on. Syndicated all over the world. And she would do the over the shoulder graphics and whatever was needed for the for the stories. Well, as they decided to
Right.
cut costs, they eliminated her and gave me the job at, of course, no extra money. Now, I could do it. I mean, I wasn't as good as she was by a long shot, but it was
Right.
passable.
Right.
And the sad part is because it was their decision, and I could do no wrong. I was Picasso, and I was, Da Vinci, Picasso, all combined. No matter what I did, oh my God, that's great. Oh yeah, it's wonderful. But I learned again that I would always have to put something wrong, deliberately put a mistake in the graphic because they were going to find something wrong with it anyway. So I discovered the more glaring the error, the faster they would find it. And then I could go,
Right.
oh my God, thank you. Oh, I cannot believe I missed that. Well, that's why you're the boss.
Right.
And then I would fix it. And if
Exactly.
I had, 2 or 3 bosses, I'd have to put 2 or 3 mistakes. But having said that, there's a thing with your brain that you see what you want to see and you hear what you want to hear. This is a
Right.
mental thing. And what I always was stunned at is we would do something like I would make a graphic, and I would be looking at it for however long it took me to make it. We would give it to an editor who would be looking at it all week as he or she was editing the show together. And then at the when we dubbed the show from the Avid onto a tape to take it down to the broadcast center for air, the executive producer, me, the director, the senior producer, and the editor would all sit in the Avid room and watch it for quality control to make sure that we didn't miss anything. So 4 or 5 eyeballs would watch every element of this show for an entire week. And then
Right.
I would tape it. The show aired on Sunday morning on Channel 2, CBS. It aired all over the country, but in New York, it was on
Right.
Channel 2 at 11 o'clock, right after Face the Nation. It was a fantastic time slot, and it was a really good
Right.
show. So then I would watch it Sunday morning, sitting in bed. And there's something about watching it on television that it's different. It's like a completely different experience. And then I would see all the mistakes.
Yes.
Now, the best one was we had a story about
Right.
the NFL. It was a story about the NFL, the National Football League. And the graphic was just NFL. That was it. Didn't take me long to do it. I did it, gave it to the editor. We went through the whole process.
Right.
We all watched the show. Sunday morning, I wake up, I roll the tape, and the story comes up, and the graphic pops up, and it says NLF. And I'm going like,
Oh my goodness.
what?
My goodness.
What? And I mean, that's in huge letters. And I'm going like, now I'm like, how could I have missed that? And then I'm going, wait a minute. How did we all miss that? Every single one of us must have seen
Yeah.
that a dozen times. NLF, you can't win. The other story, which was the craziest one, I was consulting after I retired. I consulted for Wall Street Journal Digital Video. My former audio guy and partner, or fartner as we used to call each other, was the head of the technical operation, and he brought me on as a consultant. So we had just gotten this room that we were going to make a set out of, and I had a week to create a set. So it was a nice size room, and it had a big giant window that looked out onto a newsroom. So we had a desk for the anchor and a guest, and it was just a standard news thing. So I said, all right, on day one, I said, all right, we have 3 cameras, so here's what we're going to do. This camera will have the 2-shot, have the 2 anchors. Behind them is the window. We can see the newsroom. Looks really cool. And then I have 2 big, like 60-inch monitors, and the shot for the anchor will be with a monitor behind them, and we can put something in the monitor. We can change whatever show it is. We can change the name of the show. Same thing with the guest. That'll
Right.
be another monitor. Okay. And I had
Right.
four people, 4 basically bosses that were there. And they all went, no, oh, no, no,
Right.
oh, no. They all hated it. They all hated it. And I went, okay. So I had one of the kids that worked there. They were all kids because they were cheap, and he was my assistant for the week. So that was on a Monday. So on a Tuesday, I
Right.
turned the monitors from this way. I turned them sideways so that they were lengthwise. Okay. And they all came in and said, "Oh no,
Uh-huh.
no! I hate that. I hate that." So the next day we had these I don't know what you call them, these banners that that they put out at like car shows, and they had a bunch of them printed out, and it said Dow Jones, Dow Jones, Dow Jones. Okay, Wall Street Journal. So I
Right.
got like 5 of those, and I put them all up behind it. I mean, it was garish. It looked like a used car lot. It was really ugly. No, no, oh no,
Yeah.
God, no. So on the third day, I took 2 of them away and then put one monitor this way and the other monitor that way. Oh no, I put the monitor in to cover the window. Oh no. So on Friday, I got them all together and I said, look, I got to tell you, your input has been invaluable. This is why you guys are running the place. So taking all of your suggestions, I'm getting rid of the banners. And I think that going by what you guys have all said, how about we do it this way? This camera shoots the 2 people with the window behind them so that we can see the newsroom. And they go, yeah. And I go, and then this monitor will be behind the guest, and then we can put whatever video we want, okay, depending upon the show we're doing. And then this other camera will
Right.
shoot the talent, okay? And they all go, absolutely. Oh, great job, Tom. Yes, yeah, we thank you for taking our input. And they all walk out. And the kid who's been with me all week, he goes, wasn't that exactly what you said on Monday? And I went, yep. And he went, you went through all of that? I said, yep, because that's the only way to get it done. So, so, so that's why, and I got to tell you, I now that I've retired, I've been asked to do projects with other people, and I've discovered that I don't have the energy. I'm just not going to go through it. So it's like if you want me to do a project, I do my own projects because
Right.
nobody's going to come in and tell me to redo it, and I don't have to put up with any stuff like that. So anyway, it's a true story, and because of course you can't make that up, and we've done it again. So on to the plug. Serendipity Seeking
Yeah.
Intelligent Life on Earth, Maryland's blog. Going as good as it ever was. Voicescapes Audio Theater, the best in audio theater, radio, comedy, and drama. Got a couple of shows coming up next month where we are going to be debuting a new piece that we have never done before called On the Internet, Nobody Knows You're a Dog. A half-hour radio show. Cult hit from the 80s is back. And, of course, my sister podcast, Get Off My Lawn, with me, where we talk about life, the universe, and anything involving the number 42. So that's it. See ya next week.
It might be a tumor.
It's not a tumor. It's not a tumor at all.